What are you hearing so far from parents? How is the school year going?
One of the main complaints starting in the school year, and it's an ongoing complaint, is the size of classrooms, how big these classrooms are. There's not enough room, Nicole, in some of these classrooms to have kids spread apart. And we've seen a lot of changes in those class sizes as kids move between virtual schooling and return back to school. So we've seen classrooms as a result collapse. When I say collapse, you're putting grades together, you're bringing classrooms together because the way you're funded by provincial governments is the number of kids that you have in your classroom. And so those class sizes of 20, 25 kids, those are, from what we hear, not the safest environments as far as COVID goes. And so parents are concerned about that.
Ontario is really unique in that they offered two options for parents. You could go online or send your kid back to school. That was different than other provinces. What has been the consequences of that?
In one word, confusion. I've spoken to school boards who say we have to now operate in two ways, and that is difficult. That is extremely difficult because you have to take your teachers and spread them across two very different systems. And if you look at the Toronto District School Board, they have 70,000 kids who are doing online learning. That is, in some areas, an entire school board. And they have created a separate school board for online learners. We're seeing virtual classrooms still without teachers. At last count, the TDSB, there were more than 30 classrooms this week that we're still getting teachers.
So tell me what that means for those kids.
It means those kids are behind. Those kids are behind. Those kids are 1 month behind their peers
they have no
in the school.
Interaction with the school right now. It's on parents to do that for those kids?
So the Toronto board did provide some asynchronous learning, which is not a live teacher. They did provide some materials, some resources, but that requires like a grade 1 kid or a kindergarten kid to be able to do it on their own without a teacher, without an educator in front of them, sort of helping them, directing them. It requires, a lot of self-sufficiency that you're asking for a 5, 6, 7-year-old child.
Another reader has written about this shifting that's happening of kids shifting from in-person learning to remote. Do you think that the school boards should continue to have those opt-in moments for parents?
There's some pressure, I think, on school boards, especially as you see community transmission and you see the number of COVID cases grow. There's pressure among school boards from parents, from families to offer these options because they may not want to keep their kids in school through the fall if we're reaching 1,000 cases a day in Ontario, right? But it's an organizational nightmare for school boards when kids are moving in and out. So at the TDSB, I'll use them as an example. They had their first date for switch was in September. Well, they kept extending it, but September. Then they had another one in October. Then they have another one in November, and then in January. That's a lot of change to the system because 7,500 kids moved into online learning in this last round. 3,000 came into the classroom, but that's a lot of kids that went into online learning. That's a lot of disruption to the system. And I know that the Toronto board is now going to be looking at whether they keep that November switch date or move it, or maybe move it to December or another period of time, just because of the amount of upheaval it causes in the system and for kids moving in and out of classrooms.
Of course, there's concern about, as the community spread gets worse, what role will schools play? Now that we have many parts of Ontario and Quebec in lockdowns, schools are a bit of a vulnerable point in that we could see the virus come in. Do you anticipate that we're going to see more school closures? And do you think that the schools are ready for that shift?
My thinking is that maybe we'll see schools or classrooms close, but I don't see a full-scale closure. For example, in Thunder Bay, where they have such a small number of cases, you can't possibly close schools there. There's no reason to. Whereas in Toronto, maybe if, a school hits number of cases, maybe to get it under control and then bring kids back to school. The thing is, kids need to be in school, right? Well, what's the spring has taught us is that kids want to be in school. They need to be in school. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that schools remain open for as long as possible.
What can we do as parents to help keep the schools open?
What I'm doing is I'm limiting the amount of activity that I do to keep my kids in school for as long as possible, or to keep my kids in activities for as long as possible. I do not need to socialize if my kids can be in that school building, which is where they want to be. I was speaking with a mom the other day for another story that I'm writing, and she said at the Thanksgiving table, she has 2 teenage kids, and they went around the table and said, "What are you thankful for?" And 2 teenagers said they were thankful to be in school. And so if we can take that away and just do our part just to keep those buildings open, I think that's the most important thing right now.